Good morning. It's great to be here, and it's been very exciting over the last few months to be part of this inaugural innovative way of delivering services to people across the country. So although I can't see you all, I'm sure you're out there. Just to give you an overview of what I'm going to do today, and I want to tell you that it's a bit of a cook's tour of the practical issues of coping with cancer. My brief today came from your peers, the people on the consumer organisations that sat on the steering advisory committee that told us what was important to them as consumers. So we're going to really move across a whole lot of domains that encompass the rest of your life apart from your cancer treatment. We're going to look at meeting the challenges at diagnosis and during treatment, and how you actually live back in your community while you're having treatment, after you've finished treatment, when you're in that survivorship phase, or if your cancer comes back. You told us that you wanted to know particularly about the special needs of carers, and whilst Louise will talk about that from a much more personal angle, I want to give you some resources about how you might meet the needs of the carers who are busy looking after you. And you told us that it was important to know about talking to your children. And we all have children in our lives, whether they're our own or our grandchildren or the kids we work with or the kids in the neighbourhood or the community. So scattered through all of this, and it does jump about, there are some information resources that hopefully you'll be able to write down, some phone numbers, some websites, and follow up on the specific information you need. I stress that it's been really difficult to tailor this half-hour talk to the needs of the whole of Australia. It would be incredibly boring and tedious to go through what schemes exist in each state, so I'm not even going to do that. What I want to do is to be able to give you some cues for the things that might be on your mind and to point you in the direction for trying to begin to resolve them. Just to put all of this into context, the other thing I'm sure you're going to notice this morning is that there are some recurring themes. So although all of us have our own topics, I think you'll find that there are some messages that keep coming through each of the talks. And that's a good thing, because what it does is reinforce that these are the things that are really important to cancer consumers. For all of you, it's a new and uncertain experience. Information and support is hard to find. And as Kate said, it's a unique experience for each individual. You know, there's no manual for how to do this. This is a completely new ballgame for all of you. Even if you've experienced cancer in your family before or in yourself before, each time you face the experience, it's a different experience. And there are a whole lot of reasons why it might be different. Where you have your cancer and how advanced it is, how old you are and what you're doing in the rest of your life when cancer comes. What sort of treatments have you had? How disabled or ill are you? What sort of supports do you have or not have, particularly if you're in the country? And most importantly for this audience, what are the specific problems of geographic isolation? And as Kate said too, the cancer doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's always other things going on. What we do know is that research confirms that people living in rural locations have higher levels of unmet supportive care needs than their urban counterparts. But we also know that higher levels of unmet needs are consistently reported by people with cancer who are in the younger age groups, who are female, who are unmarried, and who are socially isolated, or have advanced disease, have pre-existing or current mental health problems, have lower scores on quality of life measures, lower socioeconomic status, and physical disability associated with their cancer and its treatment. So for many of you, residence in a geographically isolated location may be but one of a number of factors that are making the whole cancer experience very difficult. All people with cancer, their carers, their family members, their communities, require support and assistance to get through. But we know that we don't all have easy and equitable access to those services. So because it doesn't happen in a vacuum, because in fact you've still got to pay the mortgage and get the kids to school, and probably for most of you go a long way away for your treatment, the challenges of the cancer and its treatment, as if they weren't enough alone, may be compounded by financial concerns, disruption to your employment, travelling, costs, and the caring responsibilities that most of us have, either for our frail-aged family and community members or for our children. It may be compounded by limited social supports, particularly if you're Kate's parents whose children have abandoned them. And the biggest challenge of all for most people is that while you were going about maintaining an independent lifestyle, you didn't really know where you had to go when you needed assistance and support. Perhaps the first resource that you'd think about is to get some general information from your local cancer helplines. Luckily, the number is the same across Australia, so I didn't have to do a list of different numbers. The Leukaemia Foundation is another more specific organisation providing information for people with blood and bone marrow cancers, and there are lots of different organisations. If you go to a couple of the big, generic, across-the-board organisations, they will give you the links to the other more specific information you need. So these organisations provide general information about cancer and its treatment, as well as services in your state. Now, these vary widely, so I'm not going to go through all of those. But what you might find in your local cancer council or Leukaemia Foundation or disease group or support organisation, you might find peer support. You might find online support groups. You might find directories that send you to the support services that exist in your local area. They're a good starting point. I'm going to move on to the very difficult and constantly changing field of employment and income support. And if I were to give you a comprehensive discussion today about the industrial relation situation in relation to maintaining and getting back to work after cancer, that would be boring, but it would also be different tomorrow, so I'm not going to do that, except to say, think through decisions before you make them. So we'll start with the people who are already employed, lucky enough to be employed when they have their cancer diagnosis. The first thing to do is probably not to resign your job. People think, I hate this job, I was going to leave anyway, I can't possibly get back to work in all of this, I'll throw it all in. Don't do that. It's a bit like when you move into a new house and people say don't change anything for a year. Live there for a year and find out what it's like in every season. So the first thing to do is to be proactive in approaching employers to find out what your leave entitlements are. Do you have sick leave, annual leave, long service leave, fax leave, compassionate leave? Can you have leave at half pay? Can you have unpaid leave? Where does that take you up to in the cancer journey? Will they hold your job open and let you come back at some indeterminate time after you've finished treatment and recovered from it, because the two are not the same? The day after you finish radiotherapy is probably not the day you'll be feeling like going back to work. That may be many months down the track. And is there an option in your workplace to return to work at reduced hours or on light duties? Is there medical certification that's required? Let's have it now, please. Let's get it going. Any of you who have had to do this know that it's a lengthy process, that sending your form off to your oncologist in Sydney, waiting for it to come back, having it processed by your employer's insurance company can take a long time. So let's think about this right from the beginning. And if you're really overwhelmed by your diagnosis and away in your big city having treatment, then is there someone who in your employment organisation who can do this on your behalf? And if you think it's really tricky and maybe they're going to do something unfair and maybe they're not going to let you come back and the new industrial relations laws and workplace agreements are going to make it tough for you, then seek advice from unions and trade associations about where your rights are. Try and anticipate disputes before they arise. And again, if you can find a mentor in your workplace that can really be on your side while you're really struggling through the treatment, then that will be helpful. It's even harder if you were unemployed when it started, or if your paid leave expires, or what I sense is perhaps a bigger problem in the country areas than it is in the cities, if you're on very tenuous employment, precarious employment like casual work. This is a really difficult area. You're probably going to have to run the gamut of the Centrelink organisation. Not an easy thing to do. So I've given you there the number and the website address to establish your entitlements to benefits. Now, it would be a brave person who'd tell you what you're entitled to, because all of them are subject to means and income and assets tests, and all of them depend on your particular domestic circumstances. The range of benefits to which you may be entitled include those ones that I've listed there. So you probably need direct information from your local Centrelink office, and if your situation is really complex and it seems like there's no immediate answer to your Centrelink entitlements, then all offices employ social workers, and you can ring the general number and ask for an appointment with your local social worker. There's another situation that happens that doesn't really fit into the Centrelink or returning to work spectrum, and that is the most common situation I think we see, where the absence from work or reduced income by either the person who's being treated for cancer or the people who are caring for them results in significantly reduced income. So you're not at the level where you qualify for Centrelink benefits, but you can't meet your mortgage repayment either, or your car loan. So anticipate this happening and be proactive in approaching your lending authorities to see what your rights are in terms of deferring or reducing repayments. And it's like negotiating leave arrangements. All of these things require medical certification. It's a long process. Get onto it before the problems happen. And keep monitoring your situation. If your income's down, then maybe you now qualify for Centrelink benefits that you didn't qualify for before. Maybe not things like sickness allowance, but maybe your income's low enough now that you do fit into the family tax benefit bracket, that you may get a part benefit that involves a healthcare card, which will significantly reduce your pharmaceutical costs. So it's as well to keep your eye on your changing circumstances. It's complex, so where can you go for advice? You can start with the Centrelink social worker. Your bank may be able to help, your union or trade association. If things are really difficult and you have the bailiffs at the door, then get help from a specialist debt helpline. Seek an independent financial advisor or your family solicitor. And if you're wondering where you might find some of these specialist services, there's a whole lot of central numbers. I've limited it to the nationally available numbers. So Centrelink Veterans Affairs, for those people who are covered by that department, retirees, and the Australian Tax Office. There are specific support schemes for people who are travelling to big cities for treatment for their cancer. And again, it would be incredibly boring to tell you what the eligibility requirements and procedures are in each state. They are all health department funded, so the thing to do is to make contact with your state health department to find out whether you qualify for travel and accommodation assistance. It's as well to do that early in the piece. Sometimes you'll find when you got to the big city that you had to do it before you left home, and no one ever tells you that. Don't let that be an excuse. Help someone advocate for you that you didn't know you had to do this and make the claims anyway. Keep a tally too of all your out-of-pocket expenses. Talk to the Medicare office. What's my safety net threshold for my family? And again, that's different depending on whether you're a single person, whether you're a married person, whether you're on Centrelink benefits or not. Ask your pharmacist to keep a record of what you're paying out in pharmaceutical costs, because again, it's fairly high, but it won't take you very long within the cancer treatment spectrum to find that you're at the limit of your threshold and that you'll get more reimbursement for out-of-pocket expenses. And if you fall into any number of a special group of people, such as veterans or Indigenous people, then seek out the specific services that are available for those groups in the community. Kate said before, it's hard to ask for help, and it is. People, particularly rural people, are proud and independent and used to doing for themselves or helping out in informal ways with their communities. But sometimes, if the bailiff is at the door, then you may need to think about charitable organisations to provide things as basic as food vouchers or help with household bills. I think it's important to remember that this is probably a temporary situation. Think about the raffle tickets and the other things that you've done to support your local charities, and now it's your turn to be getting something back, and maybe when you've recovered to contribute again. Most areas have a cancer patients assistance organisation that might be able to help with unusual expenses and one-off payments. And the service clubs to which you belong may be another source of support. And I just one slide about this, and I don't want to put you off or make you think you're going to die from your cancer, but as you're looking at your financial management and the security of your situation, it's really important to make or update your will. You're probably like a lot of Australians who don't even have a will, or if you do, it was made a very long time ago and things have changed. So now is a really good time to get it out, to decide whether it needs to be renewed, to tell people what's in it and where it is, and then put it away and forget about it. Because doing that doesn't mean you're going to die from your cancer. It's one of those things that you can do and then shelve it and say it's done. Think too about making an enduring power of attorney. You may never need it. But if it's in place, then you don't have to be doing it at a time when you're stuck in a big city a long way from home and family is struggling at home to try and make financial repayments and manage your affairs. How many of you have had this situation happen with aged or demented parents and it's too late then to do something? So it's a good idea at this time to get organised, to get your documents, policies, papers, everything in place, tell people where they are, and then put it to the back of your mind. Having struggled through difficult cancer treatments, we're going to move on now to think about how you might resume your place in society, in your family, in your community. Kate talked about the difficulties that survivors talk to us about in getting back to normal. How do you relate to others in the way that you are now a changed person? You know yourself you're changed, and you may have a different status with the people with whom you live and work. Some see you as a hero, some see you as a victim or a sufferer. Is your job insecure? Are you being discriminated against? Is there ongoing financial distress? What are the problems about being a cancer survivor in accessing insurance and superannuation? And of course, how do you move on to new relationships with a cancer history? Lots and lots of resources out there, but this is one I thought that it's a fairly new resource and I thought you might not have known about it. An excellent resource, Living, Caring, Working, for information for people living with a life-threatening illness, their carers, their employers and work colleagues. It's specifically for people in the workplace, but the information on it is generally applicable to everyone in this situation. And the philosophy is that if workplaces are informed about the challenges of living with serious illness, that quality of life is improved for the person with serious illness, the workplace environment is more supportive, and from the employer's point of view, productivity increases. If workplace agreements are complex, then superannuation and insurance even more so. And it's subject to change, so anything I can tell you today might be different tomorrow. Again, the message is seek independent advice about your rights and entitlements from your bank, financial advisors, solicitors or community legal centres. Also, there are many good websites that address these issues, but one that I found particularly helpful is thanks to the Brain Tumour Association. Very comprehensive discussion of superannuation and insurance and links to other reputable sites. For people in Victoria, the Victorian Cancer Council website has a similar section in its web. Think too about whether you might be able to claim a lump sum or disability payment if you're unable to continue at work. Policies vary about this, as they do about whether you can get some of your preserved superannuation paid out to you if you have serious ongoing financial hardship or if you're not going to recover from your cancer. You will need to be clear about what's in your policies, and for those details you can get it from the overriding superannuation authority, which is APRA, or from the Australian Taxation Office website. There are a lot of reports of discriminatory practices with all types of insurance when attempting to take out new policies. You do need to disclose your cancer diagnosis, and failing to do so will probably invalidate your policy should you need to make a claim. And just one thing to touch on, a growing area that we're seeing a lot now, For the small number of people for whom a family cancer history indicates predictive genetic testing, that's a really important decision to make in consultation with the genetic counsellors, because knowledge of your genetic status needs to be disclosed to insurance and superannuation companies. There's been some reports out of England of people being denied superannuation and insurance even when their predictive test was negative. Certainly it's trickier for people who have a positive genetic test. So that's something that if you're undertaking the whole thing of familial cancer and predictive testing, to think about. It doesn't change what you do in terms of surveillance of your increased risk, but it may change your decision about whether or not you want to have a genetic test. I'm going to touch briefly on carers, and Louise is going to speak much more in depth and more personally. But I think we really need to acknowledge the increased distress and practical support needs of carers, and I think they're frequently overlooked. The person who sits in the hospital bed and gets cancer treatment has the best chance of getting information, even though we know that that's not always adequate. The person who's left behind to care at home has practically no chance of getting information. And they have their own issues. There is the physical burden of providing care to another person while the rest of your life is trying to go on. There is your own personal emotional distress that the person to whom you're close has this cancer illness. And there is less adequate support for the people, particularly if they're not able to access the big cancer centre. I've been involved in a very big New South Wales study of people who attend support groups, not all of them in rural areas, but many of them. What we found when we surveyed a large number of people, about 370 people who attend support groups, was that patients or people living with cancer and their carers scored about the same on quality of life measures. Now, that was pretty interesting to start with, because you would expect that someone who has had or is having treatment for cancer would have a lower score on physical quality of life, and they did. But so too did their carers. So the actual physical burden of caring manifests in changes to their quality of life measures, as it did with their emotional quality of life. So they were about the same. However, levels of depression and anxiety, whilst for the people with cancer they were about the same as the general population norms, their carers had about double the scores on depression and anxiety. Now, that's a worrying finding. So don't underestimate the emotional impact of a cancer diagnosis on carers, and the challenge for health professionals is to provide appropriate and ongoing support to carers as well as to people with cancer. It's no wonder that carers are burdened. Their lifestyles are also disrupted, sometimes as much or even more than the person who has cancer. There are financial constraints involved with having to change what you do to look after someone else. There's not nearly enough, although growing, formal supports. The carer, of course, may have their own health problems. Frequently, the people we see in our cancer centres were already caring for someone before they got their cancer. So someone who's frail, aged, disabled or very young may now be having to provide a caring role to someone else. And it's pretty demoralising sometimes to be stuck in a situation where you have reduced chances of social interactions, where you feel isolated and self-esteem can suffer. There are a number of Commonwealth carer programs, and those details are given there. Carer resources that offer support groups and emotional and psychological support information for carers. The CareLink centres, which provide the actual hands-on support for people living with cancer and others, in fact. And the Carer Respite Centre. So when your carer needs a break, what are you going to do about accessing services? If you ring those central numbers, they'll connect you to the appropriate services in your local area. And again, seeking out from the many, many web addresses, one that I thought you might not have known about, and it's not cancer specific, but a website devoted to the particular needs of carers. It's actually focused on those who choose or need to continue working while they provide care, but the information on it is relevant to all carers. It provides stories, fact sheets, an email newsletter, and a monthly live chat room with guest speakers. And for example, a recent chat room was in fact a speaker talking about superannuation and insurance issues. And if you go into their website, you can access past chat rooms as well as the upcoming ones. There are also special sections for Aboriginal carers, people from other cultures, and for young carers. Now, this is what your peers told us was a really important issue. And as I said, we all have children in our lives, or most of us do. They're our own, they're our grandchildren, they're the people we live with or work with. And I'm going to focus pretty much on parental illness, although grandparent illness as well, particularly in extended families that have close ties and live close by. And really what's important for kids in the context of parental illness is their fear of abandonment. They're really not capable of understanding what the impact of your illness is on you. It's what it means for them. And that impact is greater if your treatment means that you're away from them for a long time. What they need is accurate and timely information appropriate to their developmental stage to increase their capacity to cope. Trying to keep it from them and avoiding distress for them is not going to work. It's not going to work in the short term, and it's not going to work in the long term. We know that children and adolescents are at a high risk of ongoing disorders for many years after parental illness if we don't handle this topic sensitively with them from the beginning. The parent's dilemma is the balance between enabling an understanding and protecting the child, the natural instinct of the parent to protect the child from distress. They need the information to be truthful and hopeful, and what they need is to be reassured about ongoing love and support, whatever the outcome from the illness. And don't think they don't know. They're really intuitive, and they'll know something is wrong and may imagine far worse than the reality. Better to hear it from you or from someone who cares about you than to overhear it, hear it by chance, or hear inaccurate information in the school playground. And in the long term, in fact, not telling them is more harmful than telling them. It's awfully painful initially, but the breach of trust by withholding information is a more painful burden to bear. They can't be protected from the grief associated with the parental illness. All you do by delaying your discussion with them is delay the distress. You can't make it not happen. And they know about cancer from a very young age. By the time they're out of your care, they know about smoking and lung cancer, they know about no hat, no play, so skin cancers, and somebody's mother or grandmother or neighbour will have had breast cancer or bowel cancer, and probably that person will have died. So what they know is not good, and what you need to tell them is what's true and real for your situation. And they're resilient. They'll cope, and they'll get there with your ongoing support. But remember their concerns centre about what is happening for them, and acknowledge that it's a really hard time, that none of us like the upheaval and the distress that's going on. And in this family, we don't keep secrets. It's not a good practice. We want to be honest, we want to be trusting of each other, and this is an important time to build trusting relationships. And so parents worry and agonise about telling the children, but in the end they might say, okay, so can I still have a party for my birthday? And can my friends still come to play on Thursdays? And as Kate said, use experiences that have helped in the past. If there's been some sort of readjustment in your life, if you've been bereaved or divorced or moved schools, what did we do that helped us get through those experiences? And remember when we felt everything was awful and it would never be good again, and we got used to it in the end. So expect disruption and distress. It's usually temporary. It doesn't prevent distress, it just delays it. And resist the platitudes. Don't tell them not to cry and that everything will be okay and be brave and strong. This is a really good time to be able to help them to deal constructively with negative emotion. Plan time in. It's really okay to laugh and to have fun even while someone's very sick. And looking at the positives, like any life-changing experience, a cancer illness can improve relationships when families value what time they have together. It can be an important life lesson, and you're building a basis for honest communication which will take you through to the future. Again, lots and lots of resources for kids, but some good ones. The South Australian Cancer Organisation has a great booklet for kids that you can download called What About Me? The NBCC, National Breast Cancer Centre, has a website for adolescents, and it doesn't just have to be about breast cancer, but My Parents' Cancer is a good one. Canteen. It is the Teenage Cancer Patients Association, but has an affiliate organisation called Offspring, which has programs for adolescents whose parent has cancer, and a couple of international ones that are useful. And again, all of those websites will direct you elsewhere. Some children, not all, and a small percentage, will require specialist counselling. Keep your eye on them. Contact your school, your local health centre, church or other non-government organisations. And although it doesn't substitute for face-to-face counselling, there are some good kids' helplines as well, particularly for kids who do experience bereavement. The National Bereavement Centre operates the A Friend's Place, the National Centre for Childhood Grief. So, to sum up, the diagnosis of cancer is a life-threatening process for everyone. It will stretch anyone's coping resources. Asking for help and assistance is not a sign of failure to cope. It's an important step in empowering you to deal with cancer and to regain control of your lives in the chaos that accompanies the diagnosis. If you need more help, where can you go? Well, you can start with the social worker at your cancer centre, at your local hospital or community health centre, or your state cancer councils and Centrelink. Thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to your questions later in the day.
Thank you very much. Please let's see, write your questions for Kim on the form provided and pass it to the end of your row or to your coordinator. Kim has really touched on some broad issues that I'm sure we'll touch on later in question time. I know I'll be updating our website with lots of very good websites there, and it's interesting, as a doctor, you often don't go too much into employment issues. Certainly, I tell my patients to all try and work during radiotherapy. I find those who just stop find it harder. Working and chemotherapy can be difficult, but last week I saw a lady who I just couldn't get to the bottom of what was upsetting her, and she was on radiotherapy. She was from the south of New South Wales, and eventually she burst into tears and let it all out, that her job that she had for 20 years, she was about to get in the car after she saw me and go and resign. She'd been on the shop floor and now in management, was having trouble with chemo and with the job and so on. And I just said to her, look, just slow down, don't make any rash decisions. You're a good people person. Have you ever thought about going back on the shop floor? And have you ever thought about part-time? I didn't have all the answers, but it sort of made me realise, listening to your talk, that, you know, our little interventions with patients at 5 or 10 minutes, their whole life and their emotions, they're struggling with all these issues, family, work and so on. Our next speaker is Professor Robert Newton. Robert is the Foundation Professor of Exercise Science at Edith Cowan University in Western Australia. Rob has extensive teaching and research experience in applications of exercise for prevention and management of chronic disease, as well as other health-related issues. His work includes research on neuromuscular and skeletal adaptations to physical activity and disease treatments. Rob's topic today is physical recovery during, post-treatment and ongoing. Thank you very much.